This is VOA News. In Washington, I'm Jeff Custer. Former President Donald Trump is blasting the history-making federal indictment against him as ridiculous and baseless in his first public appearance since the charges were unsealed. Associated Press correspondent Julie Walker reports.
Speaking Saturday to the Georgia Republican Convention, the front-runner for the 2024 GOP nomination for president tried to frame the 37 criminal charges he's facing as an attack not just on him, but his supporters.
In the end, they're not coming after me, they're coming after you, and I'm just standing in their way. Here I am. I'm standing in their way, and I always will be.
In the indictment unsealed Friday, Trump is accused of willfully defying Justice Department demands to return classified documents, enlisting aides in his efforts to hide the records, and telling his lawyers he wanted to defy a subpoena.
The ridiculous and baseless indictment of me by the Biden administration's weaponized Department of Injustice will go down as among the most horrific abuses of power.
I'm Julie Walker.
Reuters correspondent Emma Jaley says Trump faces a formidable task defending himself against the charges he faces.
The 37 counts against him were unsealed in Florida federal court on Friday and include violations of the Espionage Act, obstruction of justice conspiracy, and false statements. National security law experts are struck by the breadth of evidence in the indictment. They say it makes a strong case for prosecutors' allegation that Trump illegally took the documents and then tried to cover it up. Trump's lawyers did not immediately respond to Reuters' requests for comment. In theory, Trump could serve decades in prison if convicted, but analysts say a federal judge has great leeway and could impose a much lighter sentence, especially in the context of a plea deal. Here's former federal prosecutor Jennifer Beadle.
We're in the high 90% of all federal cases, and in pleas, it's something like 2 or 3% result in a trial.
This is VOA News.
Russia is a terrorist state! Russia is a
Standing in Berlin's Schlachtensee. Standing in Berlin's Lake Schlachtensee, a group of demonstrators denounced Russia's destruction of Ukraine's Kakhovka Dam on June 6th, which flooded dozens of villages and forced thousands to evacuate their homes across Ukraine's southern Kherson region. Ukraine and Russia have traded blame for the dam being ripped open. The protests were organized by an association of young Ukrainians in Germany who feel the international community has not done enough in response to the humanitarian and ecological tragedy created by the destruction of the dam. Ukrainian protester Mila Moskalenko said she was there to urge the world to help end the conflict. She said the destruction of the dam affected her directly.
Right now, my mom's home is completely underwater. So basically, all my mom's stuff and my childhood things are underwater with all my neighbors. Yeah, so I don't have my past anymore.
At a Pride celebration held on the White House South Lawn, President Biden welcomed the LGBTQ company to the nation's capital Saturday. Associated Press correspondent Jackie Quinn reports.
There was music and balloons, and President Biden opened the event with praise for those in the LGBTQ community.
Extraordinary courage and contribution of the LGBTQ community to celebrate their legacy and their progress.
He told a story about when he was a boy and saw two men kissing on a Delaware street, and his father telling him,
They love each other. It's simple.
Biden issued a special message to transgender children being targeted in some states.
You are loved. You are heard. You are understood. And you belong.
He says his administration has implemented anti-discrimination policies. I'm Jackie Quinn.
As Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky announced the long-awaited counteroffensive against Russian troops in Ukraine, Ukraine's general staff Saturday reported heavy fighting is taking place in eastern Ukraine. In a report, the general staff said fighting around Bakhmut and Mariinka, where Ukrainian forces reportedly have repelled Russian advances. The Russian forces, the report said, continue to suffer heavy losses, which they are trying to conceal. In the same update, the general staff reported Russian forces carried out 66 airstrikes and launched 39 attacks from rocket systems. The report said, unfortunately, there are dead and wounded among the civilian population. Private houses and other civil and administrative infrastructure have been destroyed and damaged. In Washington, I'm Jeff Custer. This is VOA News.
This is VOA News. I'm Joe Ramsey. Ukraine's military reported recapturing a southeastern village as Russian forces claimed to repel multiple attacks in the area. A regional official said 3 people were killed and another 10 injured when Moscow's troops fired at a boat evacuating people from Russian-occupied areas to Ukrainian-held territory along a front line. To the northeast, nearly halfway up the more than 1,000-kilometer front line, Ukrainian forces said they drove out Russian fighters from a village in the partially occupied Donetsk region. British media on Sunday reported former Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon had been arrested by police investigating the finances of the governing Scottish National Party. More from VOA's Diane Roberts.
Police Scotland said that a 52-year-old woman was detained on Sunday, quote, as a suspect in connection with the ongoing investigation into the funding and finances of the Scottish National Party, end quote. UK police do not name suspects until they are charged, but British media identified the arrested woman as Sturgeon. Several senior SNP figures, including her husband, Peter Marle, were previously arrested and questioned as part of the investigation. None has been charged. Diane Roberts, VOA News.
Former U.S. Attorney General William Barr on Sunday defended the 37-count indictment against Donald Trump on Fox News about allegations Trump retained hundreds of highly classified documents.
If even half of it is true, then he's toast. I mean, it's a very detailed indictment, and it's very, very damning. And this idea of presenting Trump as a victim here, a victim of a witch hunt, is ridiculous.
This is VOA News. U.S. President Joe Biden on Saturday hosted what he described as the largest ever White House Pride Month event amid a rash of laws passed in U.S. states and around the world critics say hamper the rights of LGBTQ+ citizens. VOA's Anita Powell reports from Washington.
Uganda recently passed the so-called Kill the Gays law, prompting some Ugandans to flee for safety. Biden has described that law as wrong and shameful.
And let's not forget what we're seeing across the country from state houses. More than 600 pieces of legislation, anti-LGBTQ+ legislation. A few hundred of those are against transgender youth. And so we have not seen that type of anti-sentiment against this community in decades.
White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre told VOA that this trend of using the law to restrict gay rights makes this year's celebration even more important. Anita Powell, VOA News, Washington.
Billionaire financier and philanthropist George Soros has laid out his succession plan, telling the Wall Street Journal he is handing control of his massive empire to his son, Alexander Soros. Reuters correspondent Lisa Bernard reports.
Soros, now 92, once said he did not want his Open Society foundations, known as OSF, to be taken over by one of his 5 children. But speaking of his decision to turn over his $25 billion empire to son Alex, who's 37, the elder Soros said, quote, he's earned it. Soros is known for his huge donations to liberal causes, something Alex said he plans to continue doing, telling the Journal that he is more political than his father. According to the Journal, the foundation directs about $1.5 billion a year to groups such as those backing human rights around the world and helping to build democracies.
Reuters correspondent Lisa Bernard. A portion of a vital highway on the east coast of the U.S. collapsed in the city of Philadelphia after a tanker truck carrying gasoline caught fire underneath an overpass, officials said on Sunday. Smoke billowed from the rubble of the collapsed section of the northbound lanes of I-95, the main north-south interstate on the east coast, running from Miami through Washington and New York before ending at the Canadian border in the state of Maine. Pennsylvania State Governor Josh Shapiro said at a press conference it would likely take, quote, some number of months to fully rebuild the roadway, over which roughly 160,000 vehicles pass daily. 10 people have died and 11 more have been injured after a bus crash in Australia's Hunter Wine region north of Sydney, police said Monday. The incident was said to have occurred late Sunday, shortly before midnight. I'm Joe Ramsey. This is VOA News. I'm Joe Ramsey. Ukraine says its troops have recaptured a fourth village from Russian forces in the southeast, where it has launched a long-awaited counteroffensive. Reuters correspondent Lucy Fielder reports.
On Monday, soldiers raised the Ukrainian flag in Storozheve in a video posted online. Video from a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone is said to show the troops moving into Storozheve. But ending Moscow's occupation of southern and eastern Ukraine is a daunting task. Russia has more men, ammunition and air power and has spent months building defensive fortifications. On Sunday, Kiev said its forces heading south had liberated 3 other nearby villages in the Donetsk region.
Reuters correspondent Lucy Fielder. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said on Monday he is working to extend an agreement that allows grain from war-torn Ukraine to reach the global market and prevent shortages. That crucial accord granting safe passage for Ukrainian grain to be exported via Black Sea ports despite Moscow's invasion was signed in July 2022 by Russia, Ukraine, Turkey, and the United Nations. It was renewed again in May, but only for 2 months, until July 19th. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken extended his condolences to the family of Silvio Berlusconi and the Italian people following the death of the former Italian Prime Minister, who died on Monday, aged 86.
He was obviously a tremendously significant figure in the life of Italy, in the political life, in the public life of the country.
Blinken at a press conference in Washington, which just happened to be with Italy's foreign minister. Find more on our website, voanews.com. This is VOA News. Former U.S. President Donald Trump is ahead of a history-making federal court appearance. AP correspondent Shelley Adler reports.
Former federal prosecutor David Weinstein says South Florida has seen big cases before, but nothing like this.
South Florida is used to being the focus of things like this, and both our law enforcement and our system are capable of handling it. But this is really going to cause a stress on the system.
As for what will happen when Trump gets to court Tuesday?
You are processed first by the U.S. Marshal Service, out of sight of everyone and in their offices. That means fingerprinting, photographing.
Trump is facing 37 felony counts related to charges of illegal stealing of classified information. He insists he has done nothing wrong. I'm Shelley Adler.
Escalating tensions between Kosovo and Serbia could delay Kosovo's future integration into the EU. Anna Rice has the story.
While European officials try to mitigate the conflict, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that rising tensions in Kosovo may lead to a huge explosion in the heart of Europe. Experts believe a speedy accession of Western Balkans into the EU could help solve the problem. To help ease tensions, NATO officials are moving an additional 700 troops to the region, and U.S. officials have disallowed Kosovo from participating in ongoing military exercises in the region. Anna Rice, VOA News.
Thousands of Sudanese refugees who fled to Chad to escape fighting in their country could be cut off from humanitarian and medical aid during the approaching rainy season. Medical charity Doctors Without Borders said on Monday more than 100,000 people have fled across the border to Chad since the conflict broke out in Sudan in April, and the numbers could double over the next 3 months, the United Nations Refugee Agency warned earlier this month. The head of Doctors Without Borders mission in Chad said the flooding that usually occurs this time of year could isolate refugees and host communities in Chad's eastern region and other areas that share a border with Sudan. The United Nations on Monday called on Libya to treat migrants and asylum seekers with dignity, highlighting concerns over their treatment, including arbitrary detention and mass expulsion. War-torn Libya is regularly criticized for its handling of migrants, with rights groups alleging horrific treatment by smuggling gangs and inside state detention-run centers. Find more on our website, voanews.com, or follow us on the VOA mobile app. I'm Joe Ramsey.